Hello and welcome to the midweek message. Been away for a little while. My church had 21 days of prayer and fasting, so I was participating in that, and that kept me away from here. So as beneficial as that was, and as God really spoke to me a lot during that time, I am glad to be back. So I wanted to continue with probably the final part of my Genesis series with the flood and the Tower of Babel, because up to this, and that leads us to Abraham, and from Abraham on is not nearly as disputed as the pre-Abraham world. Most people are in agreement about everything, at least Christians are anyway, are in agreement about everything that happened after Abraham for the most part, and pre-Abraham is where all the dispute is, and so that's why I really wanted to go through that. So I want to continue on in Genesis chapter 8. I'm going to read a couple verses. God remembered Noah as well as all the wildlife and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. God caused a wind to pass over the earth, and the water began to subside. The sources of the watery depths and the floodgates of the sky were closed, and the rain from the sky stopped. So the flood is over. Noah and his family and all the livestock, all the animals that were on the ark, have been obviously on the ark this whole time, and now God has decided it's time to stop. So that line, God remembered Noah, it's not to suggest that God had forgotten about Noah and he just like, oh yeah, Noah. No, it's just saying, it's just a poetic way of saying that Noah and all of his family and everything there was on God's mind. He never forgot them. He was carefully watching over them the whole time, and he keeps his promises. I like, there's this line that God caused a wind to pass over the earth. Everything is, and he closed the watery depths. He stopped the rain. Everything has been in his power and his control the whole time. And God uses, at least in this case, he used natural processes to accomplish a supernatural will. The earth and everything in it is the Lord's. He can do with it as he pleases. And as I went into a little bit last time, the flood changed the world. The pre-flood world is completely different than the post-flood world. We can see that in the lifespans. That's the greatest indication of the lifespans of people took a nosedive after the flood. The landscape of the world changed. The ground was beginning to feel the curse, and a lot of the Garden of Eden is now gone. Up until this point, the Garden of Eden was still there. There's no biblical indication that it had been removed. It was simply being guarded. And at this point, now the Garden of Eden, the Tree of Life, and everything that was in it is gone. A lot of, for lack of a better understanding or word to use, a lot of the effects of Adam and Eve basically being eternal beings, created to be eternal beings, and the animals and plant life, it was all created not to die. That came into effect because of man's sin. So the flood, I believe anyway, wiped that out. Any after effects lingering, the curse didn't come in. When God said you'll surely die, he didn't mean instantly. The effects of the curse were ongoing. As I covered last time, you started to see sin slowly creep into the world, first with the murder of Abel, and then, the sons and daughters, the sons of God meeting with the daughters of man and creating, however you want to define it, an evil generation. So evil and so corrupt beyond anything we've ever seen. There was no other alternative than they had to be wiped out. So the Lord is keeping his promise to Noah and his family. And I love this here in verse 15, and I'm going to read that. Oh, I'm sorry, let me back up. So the flood waters are receding now. I'm not going to read the whole section, but, you know, Noah sends out the raven. He sends out the dove until it eventually does not come back. He knows that the earth is drying. And as the earth is drying, and rapidly drying, I should say, the landscape of the earth has changed. You know, a lot of people look at geography and say this happened over, you know, millions and billions. One day they'll probably even say trillions. Once billions gets disproved, they'll say, well, trillions. And it has been shown, and you can look this up, and I read this interesting article about Mount St. Helens, how rapidly geography can change through natural disaster. You know, and scientists even said this area, it'll take thousands of years for this area around Mount St. Helens to recover, and it recovered in a couple of months. You know, so remember that the next time you hear the phrase, trust the science. And Mount St. Helens just showed us a lot, and that was just locally. Imagine what a global flood would do to the earth, would do, you know, caves. They say, oh, that took millions of years, or sediment layers. No, that took billions of years. Or, you know, the evidence for a worldwide flood, as I believe I said last time, is so overwhelming. It makes evolution look like it came from the imagination of a 4-year-old. It just dominates it in every way. And you don't have to take my word for it. As I said last time, there's plenty of documentaries that you can look at. Genesis Paradise Lost is one of them. There's an excellent one about the Exodus as well. That's getting a little bit ahead. And there's others out there. Ken Ham and Answers in Genesis. Just look at his ministry. He's got a mountain of resources with PhDs, since that just seems to be so important for people. But he's got his own army of PhDs that support people, biologists, you know, archaeologists, all kinds of ologists, zoologists that support the flood narrative. So now to verse 15, the Lord's promise. Then God spoke to Noah, come out of the ark, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives with you. Bring out every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds, livestock, creatures that crawl on the ground. They will spread over the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So I want to pause there for a minute. So, and one of the biggest objections is well, how did, you know, a kangaroo get from the ark in what most people try to say is modern day Turkey, you know, within the region? Fine, there's no reason to argue that. So how did a kangaroo get from Turkey to Australia? Well, God said right here, they will spread over the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. Not beyond the reason, you know, beyond reason to say that God led them there. He commanded them to go spread. It's interesting, and I'll get to the Tower of Babel, but it's interesting, the animals obeyed God and spread all over the earth, but the people were like, no, we're just going to gather here. You know, getting a little bit ahead of myself, but... And again, Answers in Genesis has a fascinating article on this, on how the animals would spread over the earth. You know, the kangaroo, figuratively speaking, metaphorically speaking, did not get hop off the ark, and that very same kangaroo hop his way to Australia and then reproduce there. That's not quite how it happened. I'm not going to get into the biology of it, but go to those resources that I've been pointing you to, and they'll go over it in great detail. It's really fascinating. So back to verse 18. So Noah, along with his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives, came out. All wildlife, all livestock, every bird and every creature that crawls on the earth came out of the ark by their groups. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. He took some of every kind of clean animal and every kind of clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. When the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, he said to himself, I will never again curse the ground because of man, even though man's inclination is evil from his youth, and I will never again strike down every living thing as I have done. And verse 22 is key. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night will not cease. So, I hate to break it to the prophets of doom, the global warming prophets of doom, that we're going to destroy the earth and mass starvation, we're all going to die. God has the final say, and he said, as long as the earth endures, everything he has set in place. Seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will not cease. So, God has the final say in this. And also, backing up to verse 21, again, the sin of man before the flood was so great that it in my opinion, it needed a great punishment. Something that is so far gone, God had to destroy the earth. And now, when he's saying he's never going again to curse the ground, so the curse on the ground from Adam, that was once and for all and final. There's nothing, God's not going to add to that anymore. He's not going to make the ground even more cursed. Everything he did from that point on, before the flood, was final. And he'll never again strike down every living thing as he did then. And I don't think it's because man's sin won't, deserve it. We certainly deserve it. We just I think between Noah and today, the earth has been deserved to have been destroyed many times over. But the promises of God are greater than that. And I would also say that God also was looking ahead to when he's going to put something in place instead of this. And that's Jesus. The Old Testament continuously points to Jesus. And in here, I believe it's pointing to Jesus. All the wrath that was poured out on the earth in Noah's time was poured out onto Jesus instead. And so now, Jesus, we will never fully understand the impact of the cross and this side of eternity. It's to our shame, and God have mercy on us. We've reduced it so much. We've reduced the cross to say the sinner's prayer and go to heaven. What Jesus endured on the cross, what the penalty that he really paid, is so much greater than I think we give it. And we probably are not capable of fully comprehending what was accomplished on the cross. But it's all over the Old Testament, and that brings me to chapter 9. It said, I'm going to read verse 1. God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Same command or blessing that God gave the animals. Now verse 2, fear and terror of you will be in every living creature on the earth, every bird of the sky, every creature that crawls on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. They are placed under your authority. Verse 3, every living creature will be food for you, as I gave the green plants. I have given you everything. I want to pause there. Now, don't misunderstand me here, but again, I'm going to have to hurt some feelings. Animal lovers And I believe people have taken it even past that, and it's gone into animal worship. People and animals are not equal. They are not our equals. They do not have rights. God here plainly says they are placed under the authority of man. Now, I'm going to get misunderstood, and I am not saying go around and kick every puppy in the face. That's not what I said. I'm not advocating for legitimate animal cruelty or just cruelty for cruelty's sake. That's not what I said. Now, sorry, vegans who try to use scripture to justify a vegan lifestyle. That's not what God said. You know, if you're a vegan, good for you. Health benefits, great. People who love steak, you really have nothing to stand on to say anything against them. Verse 3, every living creature will be food for you, as I gave you the green plants. Now you can make an argument that was never God's intent. Absolutely. Death was never God's intent. But because of the fall of man and the curse of the ground, and a pre-flood world being totally separate, and not separate, but different from a post-flood world, now the animals are food for people. It's God's order of things. There's really nothing more to say about that. And here in verse 7, but you be fruitful and multiply, spread out over the earth and multiply on it. So again, the same command as the wildlife to fill the earth. The wildlife filled it, and we'll see here in a minute, people did not, or they did not intend to. And I wanted to read the covenant, verse 8. I'm going to start there now. Now I'd included this in my book when I talked about covenants. This is a covenant that no action on our part is required. This is a covenant God made under, his own authority, and he will rely on himself to fulfill it. There's other covenants that required some kind of action or part on ours, but this covenant, no action was required. I'm going to read in verse 8. Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, understand that I am confirming my covenant with you and your descendants after you, that's us, with every living creature that is with you, birds, livestock, and all wildlife of the earth that are with you, and all the animals of the earth that came out of the ark. I confirm my covenant with you that never again will all flesh be wiped out by the waters of a deluge or flood, and they will never again be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all future generations. I have placed my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I form the clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. Water will never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. The bow will be in the clouds, and I will look at it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of flesh on the earth. God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant that I have confirmed between me and all flesh on earth. So, again, when the Bible, in verse 15, when God says, I will remember my covenant, he's not saying that, he forgot and he looks at the rainbow, oh yeah, I can't destroy the earth. That's not what it's saying here. It's just poetic of saying this is on God's mind. So, and what I love about this, the sign, the rainbow, we just kind of forgotten about it. And, the rainbow, the symbol of the rainbow has kind of been hijacked by wickedness. And that's what the devil does. He takes what God has done and tries to make it his own. And I love, again, going back to Kem Han, during Pride Month, he lit up the the replica of the ark, Noah's Ark. He lit it up in a rainbow, And as a reminder that the rainbow is not a symbol of pride, it's a symbol of God's covenant with the earth. And just total defiance of pop culture and that. And I love that he did that. And, you know, what I love about this, and I wish people would remember this, and we just seem to have forgotten, the rainbow, as far as I can think off the top of my head and what I've looked at, is the only visible thing that we can look at today. And it is the same thing that the people in the ancient world looked at. Nothing has changed. I mean, even in the last 1,000 years, the geography has changed, culture has changed. You know, we can look at archaeology and get a picture. You know, we can look at the Jewish people today and say, oh, that's a fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham. But the rainbow has not changed. The same rainbow that Noah looked up in the sky and saw is what we look up at in the sky. I'm just fascinated by that. I'm in awe of God for that. Only God could do something like that. I mean, we could say, we could look at the sun and say, yeah, the sun was there, but this is a covenant. The rainbow was the sign of a covenant. And I believe that's why it's been hijacked by wickedness to mean something else. But next time it's raining, look up at the sky, look at the rainbow and say, that is the same thing Noah saw when God verbally spoke to him and said, this is the sign of my covenant with you. I mean, that's powerful. When I was driving home with my son, he was like 7 or 8 years old, and there was like we had a big rainstorm here, and I think there were 3 rainbows in the sky, full ones, complete, and really bright. It was the most unbelievable thing. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. I just looked off to my left, and there was 2 there, and I'm like, Isaac, you know, look. And there was one out to our front, maybe even 2, if I remember right. One was a little bit more faint. Just the sky was filled with the promises of God, you know, and all people were thinking about is how the rain affected their day. And I just look up in the sky. The promises of God were just painting the sky, and we've forgotten about it. And it's the same thing, you know, that Noah saw. I was like, Noah looked at that and heard the voice of God. You know, we should look at it and just be still before the Lord and hear his voice. But I found this, I love this too. Where was it? Sorry, I got my paper Bible, so bear with me while I look. Where was it? Verse 14. You know, I've overlooked this so many times. It's so true. Whenever you read scripture, you just ask the Holy Spirit to just be with you as you read. Don't read it under your own understanding and own power. God will show you something new every time. But verse 14, whenever I form the clouds over the earth, and the bow appears in the clouds. Make no mistake who is in control of the weather. God puts the clouds in the sky. God puts the storms in the sky. Say, well, what about all those destructive storms? Honestly, I don't know. God is in control of it. He's doing what he sees fit. You know, I had a loved one die, and I'm sorry, and that's tragic, and that's not God's intent. But make no mistake, God is in control of the weather. When Jesus stood on the boat and the disciples were afraid of the storm, and Jesus put his arms up and said, peace be still, and the storm stopped. You know, God is in control of the weather. And sometimes I believe we have natural disasters and weather, you know, there's a lot of different reasons, and there's no absolute reason, but I do believe sometimes it's because God is waiting. God puts a storm in the sky, and he's waiting for one of his people to go out there and command it to stop. And I've actually seen video of this where people have done that. Not here in America. People are believing, here in America, people are believing that their dog will have a good visit to the doggy dentist. You know, where's the people that are going to walk out to the shores of the East Coast when there's a hurricane coming and saying, peace, be still? You know, where are those people? Where are those believers at? You know, I'm not saying put yourself in danger. Obey the Holy Spirit, but if the Holy Spirit is saying, I'm looking for someone to go do that, say, here I am, Lord, pick me. And under obedience to him, go do it. Not in our own power, not in our own will, not in our own, pride, saying, oh, I'm so spiritual, I can do that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, what if God is looking for that? And again, that's not all cases at all times, but it is some of the time, I believe. I've seen video of it. I've seen a video of a village in India, a typhoon, big one. The hurricane winds, and there was a tornado on the land that was headed right for them, going to just annihilate their village. And the pastor and a few of his congregates stood out there in the storm and commanded it to go a different way. And like on command, the tornado that was headed for him stopped, turned, and went another way. That's faith. That's the kind of faith God is looking for. Sometimes I watch something like that and I just fall down before God and ask forgiveness. I'm like, God, if I could just have half the faith of those people, how much more different would my world be? I was thinking about it today. What would the world look like if the entire church was a Book of Acts church? Not just the apostles, the leaders going around, because they don't have a different Holy Spirit than the people have. If the entire church was a Book of Acts church, what would the world look like today? Not what it does. I could promise you that it would not look like what it looks like right now. But getting back to Noah, different sermon for a different time. So in chapter 10, I'm not going to read it, but it gives a brief genealogy, and you look at the names of the sons, and you'll see some familiar names in there, and the descendants. I'll take that back. Verse 6. Ham's sons, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. You're starting to see some cities in there. Obviously, these cities were named after the descendants of Noah. And the descendants go long past the Tower of Babylon. That's why I'm not going to go into it. But I just wanted to show you, there's the names of these ancient cities. They came from Noah's sons, named after his descendants. So, all right, chapter 11, I'm going to read about the Tower of Babylon. That's said everything up to this point to get to here. So as I said, the people and animals were commanded to fill the earth, the new earth. The animals obeyed. They went out and did their thing. People did not. So chapter 11, verse 1. At one time, the whole earth had the same language and vocabulary. And I'm going to pause there for just a second, because I've read people are trying to speculate on what this language was. Some people say Hebrew, some people say, a heavenly language. I don't think it's too important to get hung up on it. It's fun to speculate, it's fun to talk about, and maybe even debate, but don't get hung up on it. It honestly doesn't matter. Whatever language this was, it's dead and gone. There's no record of it whatsoever. Verse 2, as people migrated from the east, they found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, come, let us make oven-fired bricks. They had brick for stone and asphalt for mortar. And they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky. Let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth. That's what God commanded them to do. And they're saying, if we don't do this, we'll end up obeying God. So let's do this instead, and we'll disobey God. And you can see here what they said to themselves. Build ourselves let us make a name for ourselves. There's nothing here about the glory of God. In fact, many people, scholars, suggest that the tower that they're not literally trying to build a tower with, all the way up to the sky. It's metaphorical for basically astrology. They're going to worship the stars, and some of the models that have been built based on ancient pyramid models, the middle is hollow, so they go inside, they worship with the stars. They could look up and literally see the stars. That's what they're doing. They're no longer worshiping God. It's like it's so self-centered. They're worshiping gods in their own image that they can control and they can build. And it's no different. There's a different name on it, but it's no different than what we do today. We make an idol out of Jesus, God forgive us, in our own image. We make a Jesus that can be controlled, can be manipulated, can do what we want him to do, instead of us just bowing down and saying, Lord, your will be done, your kingdom come. They're not that far from the flood. This is like they've already forgotten. But God, in his own mercy and his own promise, did not just say, well, got to do it all over again, destroy them all over again. No. But God did notice. Verse 5, then the Lord came down and look over the city and the tower that the men were building. The Lord said, if as one people, all having the same language, they have all begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down there and confuse their language, so that they will not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them from all over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore its name is called Babylon, for the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. And from there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. So, again, the name Babylon, it's possible that's the city of Babylon that we come to know later on in Scripture. And it could be where they got the name from. There's no biblical solid proof that this is the city of Babylon. The exact location the Tower of Babel was built is in the later city of Babylon, which ends up invading and destroying Israel in the Babylonian Empire. It could just simply be where they got the name from. Again, speculation, doesn't matter. It's not important. Now, there's a lot of good stuff going on here. And I already talked about the tower itself, but what I found interesting, I read about this in a language study, and it's really fascinating, the origin of languages. I won't go into all the details, but the summary, languages can be categorized. If evolution is true and people slowly evolved over millions of years, then language too would show, just like the common ancestor model of evolutionists, language would also have a common ancestor model, because as people begin to speak in early primitive languages, all languages could root back to that early primitive language. Now, it sounds biblical because it says here at one time the whole earth had the same language, so it sounds, okay, the Bible and evolution sort of agree here. But it actually doesn't. Now, the study of languages shows that languages can be grouped into having a common ancestor. For example, European languages, most European languages, if you de-evolve them, they start to show similarities into a common ancestor. And I'm way oversimplifying this. There's huge studies on this that'll take you a whole day to read, and obviously we don't have that kind of time for a 40-minute sermon. So I'm way oversimplifying this, but I'm just telling you the summary of it. So like European languages can be de-evolved and show they have a common language that they all came from. And just look at the English language. Read Shakespeare in its original language. It was written in English, and I had to read it in my high school English class. You know, they had a page, half the page was the original language, and the other half of the page was modern English. Both English. I think I recognized about 3 words in the Shakespeare language. English itself, you know, that's not millions of years old. That's, you know, several hundred years old. Or maybe other languages up to 1,000. You know, you can trace their roots. Even the same in Spanish, you can do the same thing. Or, you know, the Spanish spoken today is not Spanish that was spoken, you know, take 1,000 years ago from Spain. Not the same. Still Spanish, not the same. Language itself evolves, and European languages can be de-evolved to all show they came from a common language. Now, take Asian languages, you know, Korean, Chinese, Japanese, things like that. They all show that they too came from a common ancestor language. However, there is absolutely no connection between the common European ancestor language and the common Asian language. So when God spread people around, he literally gave them totally different, brand new, never spoken before languages. Again, oversimplifying, he gave this group the European common ancestor language. This group, Asian common ancestor language. This group, common ancestor African, you know, language. And I think, if I remember reading right, I think there was 5. All language groups can be grouped into 5 common languages that can be traced. And I could be wrong here. It's been a while since I read it. But whatever the number is, 4, 5, 6, 20, not that many. It was like between 4. It was less than 10. It was like 4 to 4 or 5, maybe 6. They can all, those different groups can be traced to a common ancestor language, but they cannot be traced together. Eventually they stop, and there's no further tracing that can be done. Asian languages have nothing in common ancestrally with European languages. Now, if evolution were true, they could continue to be broken down into a common, eventually saying one language sprouted forth, Asian, European, African, you know, South American, whatever it is. But it's just simply not there. Sorry, that took longer to explain than I had anticipated. And that's again, that is a way oversimplification of it. I encourage you, go, you can find it through Answers in Genesis. There's plenty of creation ministries out there. You can all read the PhD explanation of it, and it'll blow your mind. And also, not just languages, but the different ethnic groups also sprouted from here. Remember, as I said in my last one, the DNA to accommodate all the variety of life we see today was in every living creature, was in people as well. Like I said before, you know, a dolphin didn't evolve into a cat, or a bird didn't evolve into a dog. You know, obviously that's not the model of evolution. I'm, you know, using hyperbole, but you get the idea. All dogs came from a common dog. All cats that we see today, the diversity of cats we see today, all that genetic information was in a common ancestor cat. It didn't evolve into something new. All that genetic diversity and information was in there in the original cat from Noah's flood, and a further extension of the original created cat. I would love to see what that looked like, just for curiosity's sake, but it was all there. And the same is true for people. In this concept, and I just want to address it really fast, this concept of race is totally demonic. and wicked and evil in every possible way. It's how we get racism. It's, just one way to further divide and separate and everything. And it's just wicked beyond belief, and people don't question it. It's a product of evolution. It just shows you how demonic evolution is, what it produces. It produces, no respect for life. God clearly has, respect for love, instilled in us a respect for life. But evolution teaches we're products of random chance. We all come from a blob of goo, oversimplifying, but that's what it's saying. And, we all evolved into different races, and it's just such a demonic concept. And I love Ken Ham has an excellent sermon on this, and he talks about DNA and diversity of genetics, and he wants the word race, when it applies to people, just eliminated from our vocabulary. And what he said basically was it's just different skin tones is all it is. The genetic information, but as people groups went their separate ways in different languages, people went over here, they didn't need darker skin, so they had light skin. There was no, environmental need for it. Probably, again, oversimplifying, but let's say the people that went to, Eastern Europe, they're wearing coats all day because it's so cold. Their skin literally gets no exposure to the skin. Their skin gets no exposure to the sun, so they stay literally as white as snow. And you got the people, and they had the genetic diversity for that. Then the people go to other areas in deserts, like say Africa, and they're in the sun all day. It's hot. Their skin is exposed to the sun all day. They get darker skin. It's as simple as that. There is no race in here. It is just genetic diversity to accommodate people living in their environment. Oversimplification of it, listen to his message on that. It's incredible. The man just has an incredible insight into the work of what God was doing. But let's get past this demonic concept of race. I don't go to church and I see people with darker skin and say that's a different race than me. Those are people just like me. Their ancestors lived in a place that their skin needed to be darker, or they would be wiped out. They would be killed by their environment. They would not survive. Somebody like me, clearly you could see me on camera. I can't go 30 minutes outside in Arizona without getting skin damage. Skin cancer kills. Arizona is really bad for skin cancer. If I were to go live in that environment in a desert, and it's so hot, you're basically wearing a loincloth, I wouldn't live past a week. But I don't want to get too much into it, but that's all it is. People have darker skin because of where they grew up. People have lighter skin. People have olive skin or medium skin because of where they grew up and the genetic diversity of their ancestors of where they grew up. All going back to the Tower of Babylon. I don't know what the people looked like at the Tower of Babylon. Whatever skin tone they had, I would assume like their language, it was all the same. It didn't change until people moved on. And God himself divided them up by language into their different people groups, and they moved to different parts of the world like he had commanded all along. And as a result of that, we get diversity in our skin tone. Now, do people hate people because their skin's a little bit darker? Absolutely. Do people hate people because their skin's a little bit lighter? They don't want to admit it, but they do. The concept of racism is not limited to one demographic. Everybody is plagued by it. Every skin tone is plagued by racism towards another skin tone. There's tribal groups in Africa. They're all dark skin tone, but one is a little bit darker than the other, and they commit genocide because of that. So just seriously get over this demonic concept of race. It's a lie from the pit of hell. There's only one race, the human race. And within the human race, some people have darker skin tone. Some people, their facial structure is a little bit different. They're, like, I don't want to get into it, but and diseases that affect different ethnic groups are, again, because ethnic groups tend to stick together either by geographic location or even like within my own neighborhood. People tend to stick together trying to break that. The church should be the leader in breaking that, by the way. So diseases stay within that gene pool. That's why certain ethnic groups are prone to certain diseases and others are not. It's really fascinating. If you could ever just take an afternoon and just read up on genetics, it's really fascinating. It just has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the concept of race. Nothing. And you know how you know that's true? Watch kids. Watch kids play that haven't been polluted by their parents' hatred of other ethnic groups. I'm going on a little long, but I need to hit this point. When Isaac was my son, he's as white as Snow White, blonde hair, blue eyes, white as Snow White. Took him to McDonald's just to go play on the park. He would play with whoever is there. Whoever showed up, hey, you want to play? Yep. If they were already playing and he's the newcomer, hey, can I play? He did not care who was there. And you know what? The other kids didn't either. I remember one time there was a Hispanic family there, like 3 boys, all Isaac's age or close to it. He just walked up and said, hey, can I play? Yeah, let's go. They had a blast for an hour. Another time, there was 2 black girls. I don't even like to use the term, but it just seems nobody understands unless you use terms. I actually hate that term. I hate the term white person too, but that's all people understand. So for understanding's sake, there were 2 black girls there. They were playing tag. Isaac walks up. Hey, can I play? Yeah, come on, let's play. Played for hours. Had a blast. Nobody told him that they were a different race than he was. And you know what? Those girls' parents, nobody told those girls Isaac is a different race than they are because his skin was lighter. And I remember there was a church a few years ago we attended, actually probably several years ago now. Isaac was the only white kid in the church kids group. He didn't even know it. Nobody told him. Some people tried to tell us, oh, he knew. They didn't say nothing, but he knew. No, they didn't. He might have noticed that their skin was a little bit darker, and it wasn't all black kids. There was some Hispanic kids. There was an Indian kid there. I think there was an Asian kid there too. It's a large diversity. But as far as, man-made terms go, he was the only white kid there. He didn't know because nobody told him. Those kids didn't know because nobody told them. It's a concept that as they get older and victimhood comes in and all the just demonic lies of racism come in, then they start to see that concept of race. But I went on a little longer than I intended, but that just, I hope you hear my heart and you see the heart of God in this. You see, just stop for a minute. Really think about just the pitifulness of dividing people up by nothing else than the tone of their skin. I mean, seriously, that's what we're doing. God forgive us. So, when people realize that, racism ends overnight. I guarantee you, through the power of God, revelation and love of God, racism ends, and there's that term again, racism ends overnight. If people would get that concept. And the church should be the leader of it. So I'm losing my light. It's getting darker. I was using the light of my window, so it's getting darker, and the sun's going down, and I'm losing my light. It's getting darker in this room. So I guess that's a clue. It's time to end. So the longest sermon I've ever done. I thought it would be a short one. So all glory to God, and I mean that with all my heart. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for the glory of God and for your benefit. So I love you, and I hope that you truly have a spectacular rest of the week. God bless you.